importante. Well, good afternoon to everyone. We are here today to discuss the presumption of innocence. So this principle is a principle that ensures individuals are not treated as criminals before their sentence, guilt has been established. This is on the Human Rights Declaration, Article 11.1, which establishes that everyone charged with a penal offense has the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty, according to law in a public trial, at which they have had all the guarantees necessary for their defense. This principle is also established in the Mexican Constitution in Article 20. Seeing as how this is not only in our Constitution, but it is also a human right, it is crucial to assure that it is not violated. However, there are people that may argue differently. Some argue that assuming one's innocence may bring more consequences than benefits. For reasons we are to discover in this debate. And although law establishes one is innocent until proven guilty, this is not in many cases seen in practice. So, should presumption of innocence be maintained? Now, we are to discuss several aspects such as legal, social, and moral aspects, cases of corruption, and racial biases. So, today we will start with legal aspects. So, we have already seen how this principle is established in the law. Staying in this topic, I would want to know, what else do the law establishes? How can someone go against not only the Constitution, but the Declaration of Human Rights? Are there any loopholes in the law that should argue otherwise? Or what are other implications in this topic?
Okay, thank you. To begin with, as you mentioned, the presumption of innocence is established in Article 11.1 of the Declaration of Human Rights. In addition, it is also established in Article 20 of the Constitution of our country, which talks about criminal procedure. It seems important to me to emphasize that this article mentions that the procedure aims not only to protect the innocent, but also to ensure that those who are guilty have consequences. It also points out that the person is innocent if the judge does not declare his or her responsibility. From a legal point of view, this is positive since it protects human rights, such as the right to freedom and the right to a fair trial, established both in the in the Declaration of Human Rights in Article 3 and Article 10. It is also important to highlight that it does not interrupt the judicial process, since someone can be found guilty if there is enough evidence to prove to the court the existence of the crime and the guilt of the accused. It simply ensures that the evidence is in fact enough to ensure the guilt of the accused person. It therefore guarantees that a thorough investigation is carried out before charges that may be wrong are made. It is ideal that these types of thorough investigations are carried out in our country, since they allow that the judicial proceedings to be conducted with the necessary information and knowledge. And in this way, it ensures that trials are conducted fairly, and this reduces the abuses of power, and it also reduces the wrongful convictions of innocent people.
Well, I understand the importance about protecting human rights. I am against the presumption of innocence, mainly because there are many cases in which there is evidence that it is substantial, and sometimes the law states that everyone is innocent until proven otherwise, which may lead to guilty individuals going free. And many critics agree with this, and they also state that individuals may escape conviction due to lack of evidence or legal technicalities. So they argue that a presumption of guilt could result in a more effective and efficient criminal justice system. Additionally, the presumption of guilt can protect society, since it removes potential criminals from society, which can have an overall better impact in our community. And also, it is believed by some that a presumption of guilt can act as a deterrent to potential offenders, because people being more aware of how their illicit actions can have horrible consequences, so people might be discouraged to participate in criminal behavior, and maybe this can help us to have a better society. And also, as many of you know, we have a delayed justice system in our country, and El Financiero completely agrees with this, and it is a reality. And the truth is that our justice system has been characterized by alarming delays. So the presumption of innocence can cause guilty individuals to be free, and long delays can have significant implications for the victims of the crimes. And well, there are many aspects that contribute to delayed justice, and this can delay for months or even years, which is very bad, especially for the victims, because victims will not have like closure and there will not be a resolution, so this can have emotional distress, frustration, and many other things. So by holding the accused accountable, the system can provide a sense of justice to victims and address their concerns faster.
Okay, so the presumption of guilt was mentioned, and in the case of the presumption of guilt, a single accusation makes a person guilty and gives them the responsibility to defend themselves, even when there is a possibility that they are innocent. For example, there is a case of preventive or provisional detention in which a person is deprived of his or her freedom while the criminal procedure is being carried out. This happens until the person is able to prove their innocence, not until someone else proves that they are guilty. In our country, until 2021, it was considered that 42.8% of the people who were incarcerated were in provisional or preventional detention, according to data of the Secretaría de Seguridad y Protección Ciudadana. Well, as you said, in Mexico there are long legal processes that may take years, but I think that this is a reason in favor of the presumption of innocence, since our country is characterized for unfair and often inhuman detentions. Therefore, it is important to comply with the requirements of law that give the citizens the possibility to defend themselves and have a fair trial with all the guarantees of a fair trial. Avoiding injustices, since it demands that the organs do not act under preconceived ideas, because, well, the objective of the presumption of innocence is to provide protection, not to interrupt legal processes. Finally, I would like to mention a phrase by a Roman jurist called Domicio Ulpiano, which says that no one should be condemned on suspicion because it is preferable to leave a crime unpunished than to condemn an innocent person.
While I understand all of your points, there are sometimes cases in which there is substantial and undeniable evidence of guilt, and maintaining a presumption of innocence may be time consuming, and in these cases, I believe that the best thing to do would be to prioritize efficiency and quickly address the matter by presuming guilty and proceeding accordingly. And also, there are cases where there is immediate and clear threat to the public safety. So when there is strong evidence indicating this, I believe that it is more important to declare presumption of guilt, so our community is safer and have overall a better society. And you also mentioned earlier that you want people to have like long time to investigate more evidence, but as I mentioned, there is a delayed justice system, and adding more time to this can be very impactful for victims because they will never reach a resolution and they won't have closure, and this would just delay justice for victims and put society in danger.
Well, I think you both touched very interesting topics, especially the one of the delayed justice, which I believe we will go back when we talk about corruption. But first, I would like to get into the more social and moral aspects of this debate, because we know that public perception has a huge impact, because it can influence a case, for example. We also know there is such a thing as social pressure, in which there is sometimes pressure to presume one is guilty. And this was not a case in Mexico, but I believe this is a very well-known international case, which is the Depp versus Heard defamation case, in which we saw how social media played a very important role and how public opinion also kind of influenced what was at the end sentence. And because we know media also influences social opinion and creates social pressure, we also know that the public may still see someone as guilty even though they are already proven innocent. So what can be argued about this?
Well, first of all, I want to argue that I think that everyone should be processed as innocent until proven differently. So if no sentence has been told, why should we just jump to a conclusion? I really don't think that this is something that we don't have the right to do this. So if we talk about social stuff, right? We have to talk obviously about the cancellation culture, because I think that with the cancellation culture, like each and every one of us in the social media acts as a judge, and that's not our place. That's not a thing we can do. I understand that in some cases, as gender violence and other type of social stuff, like we have to give our cheer of the victims, but we you can even say that you the victims in many times does not want to talk about like what happened to them, and that's okay. But we, like socially talking, actually, I want to go back with that Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case. It's a pretty mediatic case, and I think that Johnny Depp, like the social sentence that we gave to Johnny Depp was not the correct one. You can see how the social stuff can affect someone's life. For example, Johnny Depp lose a lot of contracts, a lot of money, like economically talking, and even that affected his career. So we can like go a little bit deeper with hashtags like I believe you and hashtag I know what you're telling is true, and that's okay because we're like giving someone our our help and a safe space to talk, but we didn't have any proof that what the other person is talking about to that to be the truth. We didn't know that, so I think that we should, yes, help someone, but not make a statement about if something is true or false. Because again, who are we to condemn someone without proofs? Are we judging correctly, or are we just letting our emotions drive us to a false statement?
Well, the other side argues that the lack of presumption of innocence will lead to the public to demonize and just publicly push a person to not be innocent. But the truth is that the public and social media and the media will pass a sentence whether there is a presumption of innocence or not. Too many times have we seen the media push this narrative of someone being as innocent without proof, without context, just doing it, and this creates a bias towards innocence in judges, juries, and society itself. Many studies show that in public accusations of sexual assault, contrary to what the person in favor of presumption of innocence says, that the bias is towards men in cases of sexual assault many times in the legal aspect and even in society. And the idea that a person's life is ruined after an accusation like that is an incomplete generalization. And just to give some examples, Alfonso Vasquez, accused of sexual assault, still in Congress. Agustin Arcos, accused of sexual assault, and still a mayor of a small town in Veracruz. And these are just some examples, and it doesn't matter whether they're innocent or not, but their life didn't change a single bit. Another example is that in Mexico, 1 out of 1,000 accusations for child SA, only 1 out of those 1,000 is convicted. So, well, this leads me to the argument that placing too much emphasis on the innocence of the accused can reject the experiences and needs of the victims. An overbearing focus on the accused rights will overshadow the trauma and suffering lived by the victim. The term only serves to privilege the accused over the victim. In the context of Mexico, with the presence of high-profile criminal organizations, the presumption of innocence can hinder the rise of society to well-being and safety. the release of potentially dangerous individuals is not only an irresponsible act, but it's a cowardly act that only leads to the increase of crime and societal collapse.
Okay, so, well, I do agree with what you say about like these people being just like free, like doing stuff and being free. But I don't think that's something that has to do with a social aspect of this, because that's more about like a legal thing. The lack of legal force with someone like. I know, like there are places and countries that if you if you want to be a political like figure, you cannot have any kind of record whether you are innocent or not. So that's something that we should fix like legally, but socially, I'm pretty sure that if you enter Twitter and search about that case, there are people that demonize these men. And it's something that can happen, you know. You only have like one part of the story, you know, the whole thing. And in the case of Amber Heard, she presented a lot of information that was false, fake information, and that's you know, like that is just to misinformate the media, and if you misinformate the media, you only cause like demonize someone and just cancel its career, its life. You cannot say that. If I say that one of you are a sexual assault, like you sexually assault someone, that is not true. But at the eyes of the tech or of the other people, you are being canceled. And okay, you are innocent, and you prove that you're innocent. Your life is like socially, your life ended because whether it was a mediatic or not like case. I'm pretty sure that many people like will just stop talking to you because you were involved in a sexual assault case.
Well, when talking about the specific examples you mentioned, I believe corruption is also a topic that is present. And well, in this same line, we all know that Mexico is well known for being a corrupted place. According to Transparency International 2021 Corruption Perception, Mexico ranks the 124th place out of 180. And this corruption is of course present in the law system. And we, of course, because of this, have weak justice institutions. So, you also mentioned when we were talking about the legal aspects about arbitrary detention, and I believe this is also like there are many cases of preventive measures that are used in excess, which is of course depriving an innocent for their freedom. So we also know we have a lot of innocent people in jail because of corruption, and we also know that wealth and privilege play a pretty huge role because the more resources you have, the more you can dictate the law. So what can be said about when talking about corruption? Sorry.
Yes. Well, first of all, in almost all the corruption cases, there exists a lot of information and credible testimony that directly implicates the defendants. And in such situation, it is said that the presumption of innocence should be challenged, because there's an overwhelming amount of information that directly implicates the defendant's guilt. We all know that corruption is a crime, and especially here in Mexico, according to legal documents, it is stated that corruption represents almost 17% of the crimes that occur here in Mexico. And also, it undermines the integrity of institutions and puts at risk in a lot of aspects to the society. In many cases, acts of corruption involve a web of complicities and also cover-ups that obstruct the investigations against the defendants and that also make finding evidence more difficult. So therefore, the presumption of innocence should be challenged in cases of corruption, especially when there's a lot of information that all people know, and to support that evidence supports the allegations.
Okay. Yes, so like in every other Latin American country, it is true that corruption in Mexico is a very common practice. But denying innocence until proven guilty is just nonsense, because in Mexico there are a lot of people that are in jail because of injurious reasons. Like in a report by La Silla Rota called Edomex, La Fábrica de Culpables, says that Mexican governments put innocent people in jail because in order to increase the number of conviction and to raise efficiency rates and defend the advance of their governments in terms of public security. So there are all of these examples that people and governments that put innocent people in jail only because they want to put up the rates of public security, and the other people cannot have a second change, and the only way to put this second change is by securing them innocence until proven guilty. So you can't say that in Mexico, a country full of people in jail that are not that don't have to be there, we can't have innocent proven guilty, but because there is the only way that we can have a second change for every one of them.
Well, first of all, I think that we need to understand that in many corruption cases, the defendants are people with a lot of economic and political power, and who have access to a great deal of financial resources. And these power and these financial resources that they have include hiring the best lawyers, also interfering with the judicial system, and obstructing all the investigations. In contrast, as you said, victims of corruption and society in general don't have the lack of power, and also don't have in most cases all the financial resources that the defendants have that are accused of corruption. So given this inequality of resources and power, the presumption of innocence should be challenged, because this can favor the corrupt defendants to continue doing corrupt acts and also to perpetrate impunity. In this case, this would allow to have a fairer balance between the judicial system, and also for the defendants to not only presume their innocence, but fight to demonstrate that they are innocent. And I think this would favor everyone, and we could have a better, like an advance in this aspect of corruption.
Okay, I see what you see, but I consider that it is wrong, because I know that there are a lot of people that have money and a lot of people that maybe can be corrupt in these terms and can hire the best lawyers, but I think you're thinking about the future and you're not thinking about the people that are right now in jail. Like, we can think about the Matanza Tlatelolco, where a lot of innocent people are in jail right now that because of political reasons and because of corruption reasons, or we can talk about the example that I mentioned, that these are examples that because of what innocent people are now in jail because of corrupt governments and corrupt people, like you mentioned. But this, as I mentioned before, this is why we need innocent until proven guilty, because that bad people, that corrupt people, put all of these persons into jail, and the only way that they can stay forever there is by giving them a second chance, is by truly believe that maybe they are not guilty, that maybe they are not what the judgments say. So because of that, we need innocent until proven guilty.
Well, finally, I'm continuing with what you say, and as I mentioned before, in cases of corruption, many of the defendants are people with a lot of political and economical power, and also these people have like a very dark background with corruption generally, and all that information is known. But according to some studies made by investigators of political science of the SNI, there is demonstrated that people take like people from the society as victims, and because of the presumption of innocence of those defendants that committed the corrupt acts, those victims continue are put in jail, and they are like lived there, but without like giving the correct punishment to the people that really did the bad things. So I think that this is happening now in the actuality, and we have to do something like to change this vision and to make people pay for what they did.
Well, when talking about wealth, power, we also talk about social and economic inequality, and we also need to talk about racial biases. Because we know that many people are judged because of this. They are presumed guilty before even showing evidence or seeing evidence just because of their race. And I believe there are many well-known cases in the US where this has happened, but this is also a reality here in Mexico. So how can we ensure this right of presumption of innocence is not violated depending on your race or your socioeconomic level?
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. For my part, I argue that racial bias in the legal system undermines the principle of innocence until proven guilty. Persons belonging to minorities, particularly indigenous, Afro-descendant, and migrant communities, face systemic bias at various stages of the criminal justice process, and they are more likely to be subjected to racial profiling, harsher treatment by law enforcement, and biased jury selection. And these biases can lead to higher arrest rates, unfair trials, and wrongful convictions, as Tania Ramsey, Executive Director of Amnesty International in Mexico, commented on 2017. And this surrounding the presumption of innocence and perpetuating racial disparities in the justice system.
Well, in my part, I acknowledge that racial biases exist. However, the presumption of innocence remains a fundamental principle in the legal system. The burden of proof lies with the prosecution, and guilt must be proven. While racial biases can impact certain aspects of the legal system, such as police practices and jury selection, the courts have mechanisms in place to address these issues, such as challenges for cause and Batson challenges. Efforts are being made to promote fairness and reduce racial disparities, ensuring that the principle is being upheld. Mexico's legal system has taken actions to address racial bias. For example, the General Law for the Prevention and Elimination of Discrimination, which provides a legal framework to address racial bias and enforce penalties for discriminatory acts.
Thank you for your response. However, I maintain that racial bias continues to undermine the presumption of innocence. And also, we have the topic of impunity in Mexico. Impunity in Mexico persists in relation to arbitrary arrests and detentions, as with most crimes. We have in Mexico we have the percentage of impunity of 99%, according to the 2016 Mexico Global Impunity Index. And Mexico City and most of the states that submitted responses to Amnesty International for the 2017 report didn't provide specific responses on impunity for arbitrary detentions and arrests. And for example, we have the state of Tabasco responded that it has no record of administrative proceedings for arbitrary arrest, and there is no record of police officers being criminally prosecuted for detentions classified as arbitrary or illegal detentions or whatever. And I therefore argue that the stereotypes and prejudices towards minorities, like I said before, continue to lead to unfair treatment and unequal access to justice until now.
As mentioned, it is recognized the existence of racial biases in the legal system, but the court duties remains to ensure a fair trial and mitigate the impact of biases. Judges, lawyers, and legal professionals are committed to upholding the legal to upholding the principle of the presumption of innocence. Additionally, efforts are being made to address racial biases through training programs, implicit bias education, and reforms aimed at promoting equity and fairness. Mexico has multiple human rights commissions at the federal and state levels, such as the National Human Rights Commission. It plays a crucial role in investigating complaints of discrimination and promoting equal treatment under the law. They can take action against individuals or institutions found guilty of racial bias. The specific punishments may vary. While challenges persist, the presumption of innocence remains an essential pillar of the legal system.
Well, thank you everyone for your arguments. I can agree, we definitely heard good arguments from both sides. And presumption of innocence is definitely a topic with many sides to it, but I think what I can conclude from this is that while it is crucial, while presumption of innocence is a crucial human right that protects the rights and dignity of an individual who in this case is accused in a crime, a problem rises when discussing its effective implementation, especially with the process of corruption or other external influences. So again, thank you everyone.
Thank you.